My name is Dodie. I live in Regina, Saskatchewan, and I'm a member of the Cowes First Nation.
My name is Ahmed Hassan. I'm from Edmonton, Alberta.
Hi, I'm Pooja, and I'm from Toronto, Ontario.
My name is Ty, and I'm from Bowmanville, Ontario.
It's just days from the 2021 federal election.
I have questions.
I'm an undecided voter.
I don't know who to vote for.
I'm undecided.
My vote matters.
I care about creating a diverse and inclusive Canada.
I do care about reconciliation.
I need answers.
I care about the economy.
It's my turn.
It's my turn.
It's my turn.
Welcome to Face with the Federal Leaders. I'm Rosemary Barton here in the National Studio in Toronto. Just 1 week left in the election campaign. We've been working to make sure this election is all about you, the voters, and getting you the information you need to cast your ballot. So this week, we've got each of the leaders of the major national federal parties to sit down with us, and then, as we should, we're handing things over to you. We've invited 4 undecided voters to put their questions to one of the leaders, and after their questions, I might have a couple of my own, but really this time belongs to them, to the voters. Last night, we heard from Erin O'Toole, and tonight, Liberal Leader Justin Trudeau joins us. Hello, good of you to make the time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Rosie.
I know it's busy. I know it's the last week. To be transparent, we gave you the first name of the people, the hometown, and a general topic, but that's it. Otherwise, you're on your own. We asked each of our voters to send us a quick video to introduce themselves, so let's meet the first one.
Hi, my name is Ahmed Hassan. I'm a renewable energy contractor and entrepreneur living in Edmonton, Alberta. I'm a diehard Raptors fan and technology enthusiast. In my free time, I enjoy reading, watching documentaries, and spending time with my family. I'm an undecided voter this election because none of the party's platforms fully resonate with me. This election, the issues on my mind are the economy post-COVID-19, personal health freedoms, and the rising division within Canada.
Okay, Ahmed, your 5 minutes with Mr. Trudeau starts now. Over to you.
Hi, Mr. Trudeau. How are you doing?
Very well, Ahmed. Thank you for being part of this tonight.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with me. It's a pleasure speaking with you. I'm an undecided voter this election because I feel no party has a clear plan on the election, on the economy moving forward. My question is, being from Alberta, we've been through some pretty rough economic times, and COVID-19 and extended lockdowns only amplified this. My question to you, Prime Minister, is the cost of goods and services has increased while our purchasing power has decreased. What are you going to do to get the economy back on track, and where are you going to draw the line between economic stimuli and fiasco restraint?
Great question. You've obviously thought about it quite a bit, and there's a lot of things in what you said, but I think you probably agree with me, particularly given the situation in Alberta right now, that the most important thing is to finish with COVID as quickly as possible. We can't really recover the economy if we're still facing the threats of more lockdowns, if our emergency rooms are getting overwhelmed. That's why...
But according to Stat Canada, inflation is 3.7% right now. Canadian life is getting more expensive by the day.
Yep.
What are you going to do to curb inflation rates and reassure Canadians about the economy?
Well, first thing is getting done with COVID. We have to get through that. But then as we rebuild, we have to learn the lessons we learned during COVID, which is women got hit harder by this COVID recession. Minorities, young people got hit harder by this COVID recession. So we have to respond to those things and understand the intensity of the crisis of COVID is similar to the intensity of the crisis on climate. So first of all, how we're going to get young people going again, help for you to buy your first home with money for housing, protection for your rights. We're going to move forward on things like post-secondary education supports. Looks like you're a little beyond that, but that's going to be really important for young people who've been delayed by COVID. We also need to move forward on things like childcare. As you look towards having a family, childcare costs are way too expensive across the country. We're going to get those down to $10 a day. All those things are not just good to support families for the right reasons. They're also how you make sure you're growing the economy in the right way. What we were able to do in the first years was reduce poverty by 1 million people. while at the same time we created 1 million jobs. It's doing those two things together, of supporting people and creating growth opportunities, that is the way we're going to get through COVID.
Ahmed, do you have anything else, or shall I give it a go?
You can give it a go, Rose.
Okay, we'll come back. Those were good questions, though. I'm going to start on the labor shortage, because there is a labor shortage in different sectors across the country. The CRB that was put in place to support people through the pandemic, obviously, it won't stop until the end, close to the end of October. Does it make sense to use borrowed money both to pay people not to work and to compensate employers to get people to work? At what point do you say enough? Like, is the CRB done after October in your mind?
We're already replacing the CRB with a hiring benefit, which actually is money for employers to either top up the pay they're offering people or hire on new people, because we need to get that going. You mentioned the labor shortage. Yeah. We had a labor shortage in many parts of the country going into the pandemic. That's that's obviously the pandemic made it worse. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people also took time in the pandemic to rethink what it is they wanted to do, maybe go back to school virtually, and are coming out of it not wanting to go back to the same types of jobs. So we have to be there to continue to support things. And the CERB has actually gone down to $300 a week from $500, so that's not even minimum wage at full time. We have to continue to support people who need it, because, like, I made a promise to everyone that we were going to have your backs as long as we needed to.
On stimulus, you've now promised increased spending, $78 billion over 5 years. Given the employment numbers this end of last week, that were good, given economic growth, how can you justify that continued amount of stimulus? What would you say to Canadians about why you still need to spend that kind of money?
It's not about spending that amount of money. It's about what you invested in. The $30 billion we're putting forward for $10 a day childcare will make a huge difference right across the country, not just to families, but to employers and businesses as we get women back into the workforce in larger numbers. We saw it in Quebec over the past 25 years. Making investments to step up on the fight against climate change. Those are the things that are going to make sure that people in Alberta and in the energy sector and right across the country have those opportunities.
Right, but I guess my question is, because you have spent record amounts in responding to the pandemic, are you now just a little looser with spending money, Canadians' money, on programs?
No. What we demonstrated in the budget just this spring was that we recognize the moment we're in of getting things back, but the long-term fiscal track is fully responsible. And the other thing is, there was a big disagreement between Conservatives and us on how much to help people when COVID hit. And we decided we were going to help people as much as was necessary, generously, not because it was just a nice thing to do. It's because our economy bounces back faster when we do that. That's what the international organizations all said, and that's what we've shown. We're back to 95% of all the jobs lost during the pandemic, whereas the US is only back at 76% of recovery of those jobs.
Ahmed, do you have anything else there, or is that all cleared up for you?
It's pretty cleared up. I'm just wondering about, with the inflation rates, how am I going to be able to afford a home with current rates and with no end to sight right now? What is your plan? What is your government going to exactly do to curb inflation?
Listen, we are very concerned about inflation, particularly because it does have a direct impact on the cost of living for you. So what we're looking at is, while the economy still grows, and inflation is partially a reaction to the pandemic and the recovery, that's part of it. But part of it is also making sure that you can afford that new home. That's why we're putting in $4 billion into making sure we're building more homes through working with municipalities. We're giving you extra supports, tens of thousands of dollars that you can put towards a down payment on top of things that we've already done over the past years. There's things we're doing directly to support you while we grow forward.
Welcome back to Face with Justin Trudeau. Let's get to our next questioner.
Hi there, my name is Dodie Ferguson and I'm an undecided voter. I live here in Regina, Saskatchewan. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a sister, I'm an aunt, I'm a granddaughter, but more importantly, I am grandmother to 2 adorable grandchildren. I come from a farming and ranching family from the Cowes First Nation here in Treaty 4 territory. I feel very strongly about a strong, stable future for my children and my grandchildren. I am also very passionate about helping Canadians understand this concept of reconciliation to help them along their journey and hopefully help them right relations with us as Indigenous people so we can have a mutually respectful and beneficial relationship together. I am undecided because I find that a lot of the party platforms in this election and the leaders are tending to miss the mark when it comes to concerns and issues that we as Indigenous people face in this country.
Okay, Dodie, good introduction. Your 5 minutes starts now.
Okay. Hi there, Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister. I live in Regina, Saskatchewan, of course. I live in a blue province where Indigenous people have the second highest population out of all the provinces outside of Manitoba. We also have the highest young people demographic growing in the province, Indigenous people that is, which means we have a lot of young workers and emerging young workers from my culture. But since I live in a blue province, we're really highly reliant on natural resource extraction to participate in not only the national economy, but the international economy. A lot of the young Indigenous workers have been encouraged to, and Indigenous families are employed in the oil, gas, and mining industries in this province. And I understand that as an environmental studies student, that we have to work towards a greener future for not us, but future generations. So what can you tell me that would encourage me to vote for you, as I have in the past? I waffle between a couple of parties. What can you tell me that would encourage me to vote Liberal this time around, taking into consideration the future for my children and my grandchildren as Indigenous workers in Canada?
Oh, thank you, Dodie, for your question. And it's that balance we're all struggling with. We know we need to go even stronger and cleaner on fighting climate change, but we need to bring people along with us right across the country. Quite frankly, unless we bring along workers and people in Saskatchewan and Alberta particularly, we don't get to meet our reduction targets. We don't get to do what we need to do to make sure our kids and grandkids are safe. So it's about partnerships. It's about understanding that Canada is a country of natural resources, and that'll always be a big part of our economy. But there's ways we can do it, things we can invest in, partnerships we can build that are sort of longer in the stewardship. One of the things we're putting forward in this election is a $2 billion fund for communities in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Newfoundland to help transform, to help look at what the next opportunities are beyond oil and gas, because even the big oil and gas companies have recognized they have to hit net zero by 2050 as well. We're going to help them by putting a cap on the emissions that sector can put out and start to decrease it with them. Those are the things we need to do, but we need to accompany your kids and your grandkids as we're doing this.
Okay. I guess I'm still back to my question. How does this make Indigenous workers, specifically in Western Canada, how does this make this an enticement for us to vote for you?
Well, first of all, the work that we've done with Indigenous communities across the country on economic reconciliation, on investing in entrepreneurship programs, in training programs, working with unions to bring in and mandate bringing in higher proportions of young Indigenous kids into those programs so they can get the Red Seal certifications, working in communities to have tens of thousands of kids across the country in Indigenous communities start in new schools, refurbished schools. Making those investments in those building blocks is so important. And you know, Dodie, you mentioned you're from Cowessess, or your roots are in Cowessess. When I was there, we got to sign a deal with Cadmus Delorme, the chief there, to make sure that kids who are at risk in the community get kept in the community, in their language, in their culture, not taken out to non-Indigenous foster homes, because that knowing identity and strength and grounding in your community is part of being able to succeed and contribute in the future. So those are concrete things we've done together that all comes into making sure there are full opportunities for your kids and grandkids.
Okay, Dodie, I have a couple questions on reconciliation, if that's okay. I'm going to start with boil water advisories. I know,
Yes.
I know that that's something that people focus on. I think they focus on it because it's tangible and because it's hard to believe that that's something that people are living with in this country. In 2015, you promised to eliminate all boil water advisories in Indigenous communities. I wonder, and then just recently, of course, you said we're not going to meet that deadline. I wonder if it was a mistake to create that expectation, to suggest that it could take that amount of time?
This is an issue that has been the reality for far too many Indigenous communities for decades in this country. And despite well-meaning governments, and some less well-meaning governments, it hadn't been solved. And Canadians are outraged, and Indigenous people are tired of it. So I said, you know what? We're going to make a big, bold moonshot, and we're going to do it. And when
Except you didn't do it.
Well, we lifted 109 of the 105 that were originally in place, and we now have a plan and projects and money for all of them. We're actually this week announcing we're lifting Shoal Lake advisories, which is ironically where Winnipeg gets its fresh water. So we are getting there. We've put the money, we've put the projects. It's just a really hard thing. And we're doing it, and we're going to continue doing it.
So when your opponents say there's a lack of political will on this issue, what do you say to that?
I say it took a tremendous amount of hard work, not just by the ministers, but by officials and people on the ground and communities themselves to lift 109 of them, soon to be 116 of them, or whatever it is. This is the work that people expect us to do, and we're doing it, even though it is hard, and it's been around for a long time.
On unmarked graves, you talked really tough to the Catholic Church over the course of the summer after the discovery of some of these graves, and you said that you expected them to step up. You have yet, though, or any government has yet to get them to pony up the money for the settlement, $25 million that was supposed to be part of the Indian residential school settlement. So why should Canadians, Indigenous people, believe that you're going to get the church to act differently, given that they can't even, pony up $25 million that we surely know they have?
It is something that is personally really frustrating for me, because as Prime Minister, I went to see the Pope and asked him personally and directly to please step up on this and come and make the apology in person. And as a Catholic, I'm kind of embarrassed that my church has continued to not do what I think is part of the core of the faith, which is reconciliation, forgiveness, atonement, those sorts of things. So I'm going to keep pushing, and
but
like
what else can you do? I mean,
well,
you've had a conversation with the Pope. What kind of leverage do you have with the Catholic Church?
The separation of church and state means I don't necessarily get to command what the Catholic Church does, but millions of Catholics across this country who are disappointed with what their faith leaders have not done, and there are some extraordinary leaders who've taken great steps, some that are dragging their heels. We need to, if we want to call ourselves Catholics, continue to push on them.
But the decision that you made to appoint, we haven't appointed, you're going to appoint, if you're re-elected, a special interlocutor to be sort of the person that goes between communities and the government and supposedly the church. Could that person also have the ability to find and seek justice for some of these acts that are criminal acts? Is that part of the mandate?
Yes, that is part of the mandate, to look at the legal framework, look at the legal tools that we have. But the interlocutor is not about us in the Catholic Church nearly as much as it is about communities themselves, about making sure that what communities want, what communities need to grieve, to heal, to get justice, to have clarity, to continue the work. That is what that focus is, to make sure that families and communities themselves are at the center of that work.
Welcome back. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau is here taking questions from undecided voters. Watch this.
My name is Ty Simpson. I am 29 years old and I live just north of Bowmanville, Ontario with my parents Neil and Suzanne and my Fox Red Labrador Retriever Finn. For the past 2.5 years, I've been working at a big box retail operation near my parents' home, a job that pays little and has not much in the way of prestige, but allows me to explore my artistic interests, namely writing and releasing original music. I am an undecided voter because I do not subscribe to any particular political orientation, nor do I have any alliance to any political party. I will soon be moving out with my partner Nicole and would vote for any party which I felt would give us the best chance at success in the future.
Okay, Ty, your time with Mr. Trudeau starts now. Over to you.
Hello, Prime Minister Trudeau. As you heard, I work in retail for a big box store, and on many mornings in the past 1.5 years, I would watch you address the nation and implore Canadians to remain at home for their own safety and the safety of their families. Then I would leave my home and go to work at a job where I interacted with dozens of people on a daily basis, and which paid me, at the best of times, only a couple of $100s more per month than I would have received by staying home and collecting the CERB benefit. Should you be re-elected, what would you do to address the growing income inequity in this country and improve the lives of low-income workers, many of which, such as myself, were asked to continue working through the pandemic despite an increased risk to their safety?
First of all, Ty, thank you. Thank you for continuing to do the things that society needed, that we all needed to stay safe and get through it. And whether it was you going into work or frontline health workers, so many Canadians made massive sacrifices. But I can see where, going in as a surgeon or a nurse saving lives is a bit different than how you felt going into a job that obviously isn't your passion. And I will say that we have done a lot, and we need to do more to support artists such as yourself so that you can actually make a living doing what you want and what you love. But that's part of the reflection that we're having as a society. One of the things I thought about every time I came out that door was not just how we're going to get through this together, but how we actually make sure that the world gets better. And we saw that people who were already vulnerable, either economically or for other reasons, were made more vulnerable by the pandemic, and that's certainly the situation you were in. So whether it's better access to education if you want to go back to school, better supports for artists, or better support for you and your partner to be able to buy their home with a real housing strategy that's going to put more money into your pocket and support in the creation of supply, there's lots of things that we need to do, and we want to be there to support you on it.
You promised to boost sick days during this campaign for federal workers up to 10 days a year, rather. The NDP had been pushing for you to do that throughout the pandemic. Why did it take an election for you to get there? Surely you knew that more paid sick days were going to be important to people like Ty, who didn't want to risk their lives, frankly, to go into work.
Except the federal government doesn't get to regulate the sick days that Ty gets. Federally regulated sectors already had 5 days sick leave. We're boosting that up to 10, and we're committing to work with the provinces to be able to bring in more. What we did bring in during the pandemic was that 2 weeks of boost that wasn't perfect because it was a workaround on provinces that didn't have that yet. We need to get to 10 days of sick leave right across the country in all sectors. That's what we're going to work on, and we're going to lead the way with the federal government.
Okay, so you actually say that you're going to meet with provinces and territories to develop this national action plan on sick leave. You know very well that there were some provinces that were very reluctant to introduce that at all, that you really had to do it kicking and screaming.
Yes.
How do you plan to force provinces to do something that's within their jurisdiction? I mean, you're a bit limited in that promise, it would seem to me.
But that is part of the challenge of Canada, isn't it, Rosie? That the federal government has certain areas that it can weigh in directly, from borders to supports. And during this pandemic, we actually stepped up with $8 out of every $10 supporting people across the country to be able to be in their to be safe on the way through it. What we're going to keep doing is put the pressure on the provinces to do the right thing. And on childcare, for example, a number of them stepped up. Some are really resistant. But I know the pressure from voters like Ty on the provincial levels, pressure from families, pressure from people who actually know, paid sick leave is a really good idea. We've demonstrated an ability to push the provinces to do things.
Let's talk about inequalities and vulnerable people, because we all know that those people, vulnerable people, were really hit in a different way during this pandemic. A lot of Canadians were able to save large amounts of money, on average $5,800 per Canadian. So you frequently say we were all in this pandemic together. But really, we were not. We were all affected in different ways. Mm-hmm. How do you address this very thing that Ty is talking about, that there are some people that made money off the pandemic and some people who are struggling to get out of it? What do you do? Well,
first of all, from a value standpoint, the choice of do we make sure we're helping everyone as much as possible, knowing that some people don't really need it and are going to get it anyway, or do you hold back knowing you're going to miss some people who need help who didn't get it? Obviously, my decision, our decision was to help people more. And yes, the people who were able to save during the pandemic are now able to re-spend in the economy, and it's not money that is lost. The other thing we're doing is we're actually asking the biggest, most profitable banks and insurance companies to pay significantly more so that we can help people like Ty buy a new home, so we can move forward on recognizing the sacrifices that small businesses and others made. This country pulled together during the pandemic. People were there for each other. We have to keep that momentum going so that everyone can benefit from a brighter future.
I should say some of the people in the Zoom audience are thanking you, Ty, for your work as an essential worker, just so you know. Other people appreciate all that you did, even if you didn't always want to go in. I'm going to ask one more question about basic income, because that is something that has come up through the pandemic. Would we be better off giving a minimum support to everyone that needs it? Your party is interested in the idea, has voted to consider it. And I wonder if there are any circumstances under which you would consider some kind of guaranteed livable income.
I think that's something we've already worked on in a number of different ways. Because you have to recognize that people's needs are totally different. You know, Ty makes the same salary whether he has no kids or whether he has 3 kids. We don't adjust the salaries we pay to people. People have different needs. That's why we move forward with the Canada Child Benefit, for example, that gives more money to the families that need it and didn't send the checks that the previous government was sending to the wealthiest. We're boosting supports for seniors on OAS and on GIS so that they have a better ability.
This sounds like a no. This sounds like you're not interested in the basic income.
I am interested in a more complex version that says we're going to give more money with the Canada Workers Benefit to people who are making minimum wage so that they can actually get a benefit. So
but that's my point. You want targeted supports. You don't want a broad-based support that goes to everybody.
But going to everyone means necessarily some people will get more than they need and some people won't get what they need. That's where, with a government that we've been able to demonstrate can deliver concretely for people, targeting is better than universal.
Okay. Ty, anything else?
Well, I think it's worth pointing out, Rosemary, that the stock price of the company that I work for is at a historic high. And despite this, there have been widespread cuts to the hours given to the part-time employees, which make up a good percentage of their workforce, even though those are the same people who worked through the pandemic and allowed them to make that money. I just wanted to make the point from my vantage point. The notion that a very successful company means some sort of good thing for the average worker at that company doesn't hold a lot of water.
No, I absolutely agree, Ty. Trickle down doesn't work, has never worked. That's why we are making sure that people are paying their fair share, and quite frankly, making sure we are protecting workers in the gig economy, making sure there's stronger supports on EI for self-employed, making sure that you have more options than just there. And we're also working with labor movement across the country to reach into some of those retail jobs in a much more effective way.
Welcome back to Face with the Federal Leaders. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau joins us tonight. Let's meet the next questioner.
Hi everyone, my name is Pooja Bagri and I'm from Toronto, Ontario. I recently just completed my PhD from McMaster University, specializing in immunology, and I currently work in the health research sector. Born and raised in the east end of the city, I was really fortunate to grow up in a very diverse neighborhood, and I think that really fueled my passion for traveling and learning about new cultures. As a first-generation Canadian, I feel really lucky that my parents decided to settle down in such a multicultural city such as Toronto when they immigrated from India in the 1980s. I've always been proud to be Canadian, and I've never taken for granted the freedoms and privileges that come with living in such a great country. However, a recent incident I faced at the local grocery store, along with the rise of hate crime that we hear in the news almost every day, has really made me question how inclusive we truly are as a society.
Okay, Pooja, over to you with Mr. Trudeau, 5 minutes.
Hi, thank you. And Mr. Trudeau, thank you for speaking with us about issues that are important for all Canadians. You know, I've always been proud to be Canadian, and I truly do embrace Canadian values. But like you just heard, recently when I was at the grocery store, a complete stranger came up to me and told me to go back to my country. And then I continued to face a tirade of racist remarks while everyone remained silent and no one stepped in to help, you know. born and raised in Toronto, Canada is my country. And so this was a very jarring experience for me. And then we continue to hear about horrific hate-motivated crimes occurring across the country, like the incident in London, Ontario, that tragically took the lives of almost an entire family. And so it's very perplexing to me to understand, regular Canadians like me going about our daily lives can't even go out on a walk or go to the grocery store without fearing for our safety. So what I want to know is, what do you as a leader plan to do to ensure that Canadians from all walks of life feel safe and protected?
Thank you, Pooja. And let me start by saying I am so sorry for what you had to go through, and unfortunately what millions of Canadians continue to face. We want to try and say, well, Canada's not like that, Canada's not that country, but we have to accept that it is in some cases. Certainly ask the Afzal family in London who were killed. Look at the rise in hate crimes, as you say. We need to stand even stronger against intolerance and hate, call it out, and empower Canadians to be more confident in pushing back and feel safer pushing back. Part of that is making sure that weapons designed to kill the largest number of people as possible, as quickly as possible, remain banned, which is something that inexplicably the Conservatives want to go back on. But the other piece of it is online hate, where, yes, freedom of speech is going to be really important to continue to protect always, but not freedom to hate. And freedom to incite to violence. And that's where we have to realize that so many things that end up spilling over into the real world have their roots in dark corners of the internet, that we do have a responsibility to protect you and our communities and our cities and our country from. These are things we're working on, but there's so much more to do. A lot of it is partnership with grassroots community organizations in various communities to be able to actually keep themselves safe, but also reach out to their neighbors so everyone feels part of the solution. And people don't simply stand back, like in your experience, and say, oh, that's someone else's problem. No, it's all of our problem to stand up, because anyone gets discriminated against, that affects the society that we all live in.
Yeah, no, thank you. I really do appreciate, your empathy, and I can tell you're very sincere. But I want to hear more about what policies I can expect from your government to really, counter what I see as growing hate crimes and incidents in Canada.
We have we have put far-right terrorist organizations on Canada's terrorist list, white supremacy organizations. We are taking significant steps to counter the rise of white supremacy and extremism. Within 100 days, we will be moving forward with putting forward legislation on online harms and cracking down on hate speech, including restoring measures that were taken away by the previous government in Section 13. There are a number of things we're doing. We're continuing to invest in community safety programs, which breaks my heart to do, but to protect mosques and synagogues and community centers, to help them create security systems to protect themselves, while at the same time we continue to invest in more education, more community programs to bring people together rather than drive them apart. And we will always, and I will always, stand against intolerance and hatred wherever it is, whether it's directed at hospital workers these days or whether it's directed at racialized Canadians, because there's a growing wave of anger that we all have to be active in countering out there. It's around the world. It shouldn't be in Canada, and it is, and that's why we need to keep working on that.
Yeah, and this goes into sort of the last question I really had for you based on what you've been saying, and just seeing some of the things that have been happening during your campaign stops. It just really worries me, and it makes me wonder that if someone like you could face such a barrage of anger, then what about regular folks like me? How vulnerable am I? So how can you make me and others like me feel safe?
Well, first of all, that's the question I've been asking myself through this campaign. hearing stories of grocery store clerks being yelled at for demanding masks, waitresses being hassled, healthcare workers being hassled is much more serious than a few unruly mobs come out to see me, which, you know, I'm worried for the journalists, for the people who come out to support. We need to make sure that we are unequivocal in standing up for the open, generous, free society that we are. And Canadians, through this pandemic, were there for each other in amazing ways. That's been the story of this difficult 18 months. People came together. We're there for each other. We're generous with each other and generous of spirit to each other. And it's not a small, angry minority that is very loud and quite scary to a lot of people that is going to start to define the country we are. And we all need to stand up. And quite frankly, that's part of the choice we have to make about what kind of country we want to be and whether we're going to tolerate anti-vaxxers and fringe groups and people who want to take away women's rights and bring back guns. Or do we stand strong for the values that we know make us stronger as Canadians?
Okay, Pooja, I'm going to follow up. That was a good last question and a good segue to me, so I appreciate that. You did on that first day that you encountered, you know, a sort of threatening group of people. You came out that evening and you expressed empathy for those people. Your exact words, we need to meet that anger with compassion. That very quickly gave way, I would say, to frustration and impatience on your behalf. You weren't so compassionate in the days following. Does that not fuel what those people are doing? And are you not worried that you are missing an opportunity to educate them?
First of all, I will not meet anger with anger. I will try to be compassionate. But a couple of days after that canceled rally, I walked my youngest son to school, 7 years old, so excited about going into grade 2 with no mask, well, with masks on, but not virtually anymore, not on screen, seeing his friends in person. I realized how vulnerable he was. I realized how much we have to do to try and get life back to normal for him after all the sacrifices our kids have made. So I am going to stand continually strong for the almost 80% of Canadians who did the right thing, who were able to get themselves vaccinated, and those others who are putting them at risk, I have less and less patience for, because they're not just putting people at risk, they're slowing down the getting back to normal that everyone has worked for.
I get that, but I wonder if your decreasing patience with them is not pushing them further away from where you want to get them. You want these people to get vaccinated, right? I mean, that is the ultimate goal here.
There are very different groups we're talking about right now. The folks who are coming out to scream profanities at healthcare workers are not going to be convinced by a well-meaning advertising campaign. But a lot of people who still haven't gotten vaccinated are hesitant for personal reasons, for language reasons, for cultural reasons.
That's a different
thing.
And
we are reaching out to them, and we are encouraging them to say, well, look, if you want to go on vacation, even if you're not sure about it, even if you're scared of it, you're going to need to get a shot, so please get a shot. And every time provinces talk about vaccine passports, which we're going to pay for, you see a spike in hesitant people who are getting vaccinated.
But are there some people you have to give up on? Some people, it's just not going to happen. There's no convincing them.
Some people you need to protect other Canadians from. And that's what I am unequivocal about doing. And quite frankly, what any leader who can't even get his candidates vaccinated is not doing. I am saying unequivocally that we're going to recover our country for the almost 80% of people who've done the right thing, and those people who are fighting it, who are refusing it, and who are right now fighting for their lives, many of them in emergency rooms and ICUs because they didn't get vaccinated. We're going to try and support them as best we can, but we have to get Canada back going for the people who've done the right thing.
We're a week away from voting day. A lot of people are still very confused about what the heck is happening, why the heck you did this in the first place. Do you understand why they might feel that way? That they thought the country was just plugging along and they didn't really want to have an election?
Well, people know that we are going to be taking very big decisions, and there's huge debates and huge disagreements.
Yeah, but that's not what I asked you. I asked you, do you understand that people may feel frustrated with the fact that we're in an election campaign?
Yes, people don't want to be people want to be back to normal. People want to be everything. But people also know that getting back to normal depends on the decisions that governments take, depends on what we do as a country and whether we move forward on fighting climate change or not. And those decisions don't get taken 2 years from now. Don't get taken a year from now.
You could have done it in 6 months. There was nothing pressing, was there?
Climate change is pressing. Ending this pandemic is pressing, and that means vaccine mandates now, not 6 months from now.
Okay.
People deserve to be able to choose.
So if you were going to, if we come back and it's a minority government, because it sure looks that way, and it's a minority Liberal government, you're going to be okay with that. You're going to be able to make that work, even though you've just said, I can't make it work and I need a renewed mandate.
Everyone in that parliament will have spent the last 6 weeks talking to Canadians about the pandemic, about climate change, about how we need to go even further, even faster. I am going to take the tools we developed during this pandemic crisis to apply them to the climate crisis, to apply them to the housing crisis, to apply them to reconciliation. And on those big ideas, Canadians deserve to have their say. 2
more questions. One of them is about climate change. Our emissions aren't dropping yet. I know experts say that we will get to the 30% mark, but why
36%.
36%, you're quite right. Why are you so confident, though, that you can raise the targets again, given that it did take probably too long to get to where we're going to be?
Our plan we announced last December gets us to 36%. We need to get to 40, 45, and beyond. We need to get to net zero. What we're proposing in this election, a cap on oil and gas sector emissions that will start decreasing, moving aggressively on zero-emission vehicles, moving aggressively on getting a net zero electricity grid, moving aggressively on protecting more of our land and oceans than we ever have before. We are able to do it, and Canadians are already showing that. When we see the investments in the Ford plants, in the battery plants, in the new jobs, when we're able to turn the steel plants away from coal towards electric arc, which we're just announcing that we're doing, these are the things that can give us confidence that there are good jobs and careers as well as a protected planet.
For the people in Alberta and Saskatchewan, places where you don't have a seat, you didn't win a seat in 2019, what would you say to reassure those people in terms of their careers? So you're telling them eventually those careers aren't going to exist. They're not going to look like they do now. So what is the timeline for someone who's trying to plan their life? How much longer do I have in this sector?
Construction jobs in hydrogen, construction jobs in wind, construction jobs in farming, construction jobs, jobs in the digital economy.
Yeah, but
jobs
is that far off? Is that
no,
here?
that is now. That is right now. And the longer people cling to oil and gas, yes, we're not going to turn it over overnight. But even the big oil companies have recognized we need to get to net zero, even though some provincial governments have not. They're not doing a service to their citizens by pretending that all is going to be okay when the world is turning away from that. Our choice right now is to build for a better future and better careers. The way we do that is recognize where the world is going, use what we can now, and the knowledge and the innovation and the leadership of those people in the oil sector who will be able to turn their minds and ingenuity towards those next things.
But those people aren't voting for you. Those people aren't buying this argument.
But they are Canadians that I get to serve, that I need to serve, and building a better future for them, whether or not they vote for me, matters deeply to me.
But if there's such urgency around the climate crisis, and some people believe there is, why not just try to govern for 2 more years? Because you know that you have a plan.
Because, well, quite frankly, we are the only ones with a real plan. The NDP's plan got a failing grade on it.
But you were the government. You could have just moved forward with the plan. There was nothing preventing you from doing that.
Well, everything we are doing in a minority government goes slower.
Your budget was passed, your throne speech went ahead.
Yeah, but the conversion therapy wasn't banned.
You put that on the table at the last minute.
Yeah, we did not. We've been working on it for many, many months.
Took a while.
You know that.
Took a while.
Yes, and hang on. The budget, you want to talk about the fall economic statement that was supposed to start giving people help in January that didn't get passed until the spring because the Parliament delayed it? Listen, nobody cares about how Parliament is delayed. People want things to get done. And right now, we're in a choice where we get to move forward harder, faster on the big things that matter, or we sit back and take Canada back. That's not what Canadians want.
Okay, one more question. You were asked a question the other day about Jody Wilson-Raybould. It's not a question about her, but your answer was intriguing to me. You said that over the years, you end up carrying a number of things. That sounds to me like someone who's admitting he's got some baggage after being in government for a while. You've had 3 ethics investigations. One of them concluded that there was a breach. 2 others did not. Is the baggage from being around for a while, being the Prime Minister, starting to get in the way of Canadians trusting you and wanting to give you another chance? Because you know you've got the baggage, you've admitted it.
Of course. I have, you know, the scars to prove it on the big things that we've fought for, on the things
Well,
that
some
we've
of the
done,
mistakes that
and
you've
the
made
things
too.
that we haven't done.
Yes,
Absolutely.
but the things that you have made mistakes on.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. You can't govern in a way that you're not going to, you know, wish that you could have done things differently or things could have gone differently. And a lot of that is interpersonal stuff that's frustrating. But every step of the way, I've been focused on doing the best I possibly can for Canadians with an extraordinary team of people across the country who are diverse and challenging in some times and devoted to this country in different ways and other times, who we've been able to pull together to do things that this government, that Canadian governments have never done in the past.
But does it make it harder to convince Canadians that you need more time when you've got this stuff attached to you?
It should always be hard to convince Canadians that you're the right person to lead them, because this is a really important job in an amazing country with huge challenges. But what I've been able to learn, particularly over these past 18 months, about what we can do in facing a crisis, I want to go even faster, even harder, even bigger. And for that, Canadians need to step up and say, we want that too.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you all, the voters, super great undecided voters with fantastic questions. Thank you for those. Thank you to our Zoom audience for dialing in and listening along. And thank you to Mr. Trudeau for giving us so much of his time. That's it for tonight's Face to Face with the federal leaders. Thanks again to everybody here who made the time. Tomorrow night, we will have NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. And if you missed our conversation with Aaron O'Toole or anything from tonight, you can catch it again on the CBC News app on CBC Gem. I'm Rosemary Barton. Thanks again, and I'll see you back here tomorrow.